All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Samantha O'Donnell. I'm here with Deloitte as part of our International Development, Water, Climate, and Energy Group. And today, with a few of my partners from the Ghana NWASH project, we're going to be talking about strategies to price water affordably across different contexts in northern Ghana. And so today we'll have Dominic from Global Communities give some opening remarks and set the stage for our service providers to then go over their approaches to pricing water. And then we'll have a great panel with all of our service providers on affordability and pricing water. That will be moderated by myself and my colleague Valerie from Aquaya. And then Global Communities will wrap us up and give some closing remarks. And so with that, I will pass it over to Dominic.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Dominic Osei. I'm the Chief of Party at the Enhancing WASH project. So today we'll be looking at the work that we are doing in the northern Ghana and then how to involve more of the private sector when it comes to water service delivery. So Enhancing WASH is a 5-year project funded by USAID. And then we are working in the northern region, all the 5 northern regions plus UT. You know, there are about 66 districts in the regions that we are working in, and then we are currently implementing the project in 30 districts. The project is being implemented by a big consortium. We are about 11, and then GC, Global Community is the prime. And then we form a consortium based on the expectation of the USAID. This one is a behavior-led, and we needed to do a lot of work with the government and then the communities as well. So the project was designed based on 4 main pillars or resource areas. And the first result is to work with the government agencies, right from the ministries to MMDAs, to ensure they budget well for WASH activity, and also to be able to release the funds to the MMDs that are implementing at the local or the grassroots level. Then the second pillar, we've seen that the government alone cannot do it. We need the private sector to work in the WASH space. And I want the government to create a enabling environment so that the private sector can thrive when they come in. The third result is what we call the classical WASH. That is where we work with the communities, the families, to be able to adopt inclusive behaviors and also to provide WASH facilities as part of implementation. And then the last one is also, once we're asking the private sector to come in, we want them to be efficient, we want them to be able to provide affordable service. So what we are going to look at today, sit with the resource 4, affordable service delivery. Yeah, so the WASH space in Ghana, like most of the developing countries, are facing a lot of challenges. We know that there's low service delivery and also, low service delivery. And then when you look at the rural water space, it used to sit with Ghana Water Company. They were providing water at the rural sector. Ghana Water Company is mainly for the urban, but they were providing services at the rural areas as well. And then in 1998, we carved the CWSA out of Ghana Water Company to be a regulator for the rural sector, and also they were helping to provide facilities for the rural communities. Now we look at the government's duty when it comes to, or what government is supposed to do when it comes to WASH or rural water service delivery. We expect the government to provide direction through policies and guidelines, and they are doing it well, and in some cases they also provide facilities. And one of the policy guidelines is the National Water Policy, which was launched not too long ago. And in that policy is encouraging private sector participation and to help improve or bridge the infrastructure gap. And also most of the infrastructure provision is being done through NGOs funded by the donor community. Then when we started the rural water delivery We started with undug wells, both protected and unprotected, and then we moved on to boreholes with hand pumps. And in Ghana, we are using mainly 4 main hand pumps. That's the Ghana Modified India Mark II, NIRA, Affordably, and then Ghana hand pumps. Because we started with hand pumps, we adopted the community ownership and management, the COM concept, because we thought at that point the community will be able to manage those facilities to ensure sustainability. But we've seen that it's not working well with the small town water systems. So when we realized that the point sources were not sustainable for the big communities, because I know in Ghana, when we started, some communities were receiving like 6 boreholes at a time. And what they were doing is that when one breaks down, they abandon it and move on to the other 5. When the next one breaks down, they try to cannibalize the first one to fix that one. So at a point you go and you only see about 2 out of the 6 boreholes working. So we realized that for the big towns, we have to move to the next level, and we adopted the small town water systems. So now there have been a lot of improvement in the production of the small town water systems. Now we are using solar as the main power source, and then we have also innovations in the delivery. Now we have smart meters for both public and then household connections, just to help improve revenue generation. But when we switch to the small town for the with the pipe system, we still adopted the COMS model. And then we're handing the systems over to volunteers who have limited understanding of how the systems work. No matter how you train them, most of the time you go and the committee has pushed them aside, put their own people there, and it was affecting the sustainability of these systems. So because of that, we started looking at how can we professionalize this sector, the water service delivery sector. And we've seen that the government sector, CWSA, is now going through a reform to become a utility provider, because we've seen that the COMS model is not delivering the services that we want to do. We've also seen the private sector involvement, and that's what we are going to look at today, and PPPs between the private sector and the government. But we still also believe that there are some communities that currently are not in the cluster where these water service providers are working, and those facilities will still be managed by the COMS model. So we are trying to also see how we can professionalize the COMS model to ensure sustainability. Now we come to the tariff settings. So from the CWSA Act, they are supposed to regulate the tariffs at the rural sector, and what they have put in place is more like the stakeholders engagement. So when you want to set tariffs, you work with the MMDAs, that's the government agency, you work with the community to agree the amount per cubic meter. And that was based on these elements. And if you look at them, there is nowhere there is a line for CAPEX, the capital expenditure recovery. And now that we are trying to attract private sector, we have to make sure that they will be able to recover their investment. So we are trying different models to see how we can have an informed knowledge to have discussions with the regulator later. So what we are doing with our partners that we are working with is to have a second layer added to the first one that we are using, the elements. So now we are asking them that based on your cost input, where you are having your CAPEX from, you can then set your tariffs. So we have the public funding, that is like from government, we have grants, and also we have the private. So most of them have each of these things. So based on that, we've asked them to work the same on the CWSA model, work with them MDAs, work with the community, and agree the tariffs that the community can afford. Yes, so it's based on, as I mentioned, the stakeholders engagement, and then we are trying to have a little bit of cost recovery in the tariffs that they are having now. Yeah, in the sector now, we've seen that the water policy, because CWSA is now becoming a utility player, the water policy has recommended the regulator. Now they are looking at bringing PURC back to regulate the rural sector. So what we are doing is to have enough information to be able to advocate that when it comes to rural sector, we need to have the CAPEX component when we are setting the tariffs. It could be on the tariffs, or we can have an arrangement with government to support or to meet the capital, the people who are providing this service halfway. Because we've seen that if we don't make that sector attractive, we will still have the infrastructure gap, because most of the service providers will still depend on grants, they will still depend on donor support, and that will not move as fast as we expect to move when it comes to water service delivery. Yeah, so with this, I will end my presentation here, and then invite our partner, that Save Water Network. We have Saha Global and also Waterfall, to throw more light on their pricing mechanisms and also how they are trying to see the out of their capacity. Thank you very much, and I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. So good morning once again. My name is Joseph Ampedi-Boache, and I'm Head of Partnerships and Business Development at Safe Water Network. Safe Water Network, from day one, our funding, our mission has been to work with others to be able to achieve what we call healthy, thriving communities. With each of these communities having their own safe, reliable, and affordable water services. We don't anticipate ourselves as water service providers. Our objective is simply to demonstrate how this can be done so that we can provide valuable insights and evidence so that other service providers, other implementers in the sector can take it up, and then collectively we can be able to achieve greater scale and a shared success. We do this practically on the ground by setting up water stations, and that is how come we are water service providers, because if we don't do it, we need better understand it to be able to talk about it. And in Ghana, our service model focuses on setting up a locally operated water treatment facility. We have branded that, we call that a home water station. So that is typically the photo you find on the slide. So these are locally operated water treatment facilities. They are designed to be flexible enough to meet the needs of communities, both now and into the future, in the sense that we can always increase the capacity as the community population increases. So typically we do this in what we call rural and small town communities. So we target communities with population sizes averaging about 3,000. We could go down to about 2,000 or 1,500, depending on the need and the willingness and ability to pay water tariffs. We estimate our CAPEX to be averaging $35 per person, and that depends on the design of the system. So for a typical water system treatment facility with storage and a number of standpipes, serving about 3,000 people, we could do that for an average CAPEX per person of about $35. As we increase the size of the capacity, the production, and then expanding the distribution network to provide more direct or direct pipe connections onto premises, the CAPEX then begins to go up. As I said, this is designed as a flexible micro utility, so we can always add on to the production capacity, the storage capacity, and also the distribution infrastructure to meet the growing demand. And we have an increased focus on making this service sustainable. So from day one, we encourage communities or residents to pay for the water services. We see them as customers, not beneficiaries. So it's essentially being able to create a value proposition that incentivizes them to be able to pay. But as Dominic rightly said, we also look at the participatory piece of it. So we work with local government authorities and with communities to be able to agree on a tariff that is affordable and inclusive so that the majority of residents are able to afford the service. So typically our cost covers the capital cost that is needed to set up the infrastructure, and revenue so that we can be able to cover our ongoing operating expenses, capital maintenance expenses, direct service expenses because we need a team to supervise the operations, and then the indirect service expenditure, which is input from other management level, providing oversight responsibility for the management of these stations. So as Dominic rightly said, the capital cost is essentially funded through partnerships like this. Major private foundations, development partners have funded our capex cost. When it comes to operating, capital maintenance, and other costs, currently part of it is subsidized. But in the longer term, our objective is to be able to cover this cost through our operations. So how do we define affordability? As I said, essentially, we want the service to be sustainable. And we can only do this if we have taxes to fund that, if we collect them through tariffs, or if we get central government transfers to be able to do that. The fact is, the other sources, except for the tariffs, you cannot predict them, they are not available. So we've been trying to work towards being able to keep the water stations up and running, while at the same time being able to provide a service that is inclusive, that is affordable, and as many residents in areas where we operate will be able to afford the service. So typically we keep our prices at or below 3% of what we estimate to be the average household income. And for most of the areas where we invest in, we see people, or the majority of residents there, earn between $1 to $2 a day. So to that extent, currently, if you look at our pricing in Ghana, we are doing on the average about 25 pesos for 20 liters. That works out to about a little above 1 cent for 20 liters of water. We anticipate that this is enough to enable households to be able to meet their water needs and also free up some revenue to cover other household expenses which they encounter on a day-to-day basis. But ultimately, it's about being able to achieve financial sustainability. And we look at that from two angles. First of all, price increase is necessary because we have a very challenging economic situation, high inflation, high imports. A large chunk of the inputs we need to be able to produce our water is imported, and these are priced in foreign currencies. We have a high depreciation local currency, so price increases are inevitable. But we also seek to balance that by being more cost effective. To that extent, we look at growing our revenues, be able to automate a lot more of our operations so that we're able to drive down the cost. So how does SOBN consider subsidies when it comes to pricing? And what role should the public sector play in this? We recognize the fact that it is not everyone within the areas where we operate who can be able to pay for the price of water that we currently have. So within our programming, we recognize that targeted subsidies can help lower the cost for vulnerable populations. And we currently have set up some ongoing work in partnership with Aquaya to be able to objectively identify who then is poor and how we can be able to deliver targeted subsidy to them without distorting the market, in the sense that we want people to still be able to pay for their water services, but for those who cannot afford, have a more clear way where we can be able to deliver such subsidies to them, with the expectation that we can make a case to potential funders and for government to be able to take up that. But we also see that the public sector has a role when it comes to delivering services, especially in areas that are hard to reach and where realistic pricing is almost impossible. So for the public sector, we want them to invest in subsidies more strategically and also support when it comes to sustainable water service. So cover part of the capex or part of the OPEX to be able to keep water stations running. Ultimately, for us, when it comes to pricing for water, we want to be able to keep the service affordable. That is, keep the price at a rate that we will have the majority of our residents being able to patronize that. We've had experiences in the past where we've taken price increase due to challenges with coinage and all that. We see drops in demand, and sometimes it takes almost 18 months to 24 months to get price and volumes to be back to the pre-price review stage. So we are mindful of that, and working with local government authorities and with our residents, we try to keep our tariffs at a rate that is affordable to the majority of our customers. But to be able to keep services running, we admit that we need to be able to cover the operating and long-term sustainability costs. So we make a deliberate effort to be able to be cost-effective while at the same time revising our prices to enable us meet both the existing OPEX and then the long-term sustainability cost requirements. So basically that is it. I'm sure there will be ample time for you to clarify aspects of what I have shared with you. Thank you. I will invite my next colleague. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks so much,
Joe and Dominic, to you as well. My name is Richard Moore. I'm the Managing Director of NUMA, which is Water For's for-profit group of businesses that work in Sierra Leone, Ghana, Uganda, and Zambia. Very happy to be talking to you a little bit more about our work in Northern Ghana today as part of our partnership with Global Communities and with Enhancing WASH, and to tell you a little bit more about what we do. So Water For starts and scales durable market-based water businesses. As part of this partnership, we started up a new division of our business in Northern Ghana to provide safe water services to rural and peri-urban communities within northern regions of Ghana. We were able to bring in some additional co-financing to support the infrastructure expansion that we wanted to do. So we worked through NUMA water systems. You can see a picture of it here. It's a kiosk, it's a modular, all-in-one water treatment pumping system where the borehole, filtration, electrical system, solar's on the roof, and then it pumps it to elevated towers and to household connections directly. We do both retail sales and household connections within every community that we work in. We install tap stands or water kiosks to ensure equitable access to safe water throughout the community. And then part of our service delivery strategy is within 3 years to install up to 50% of the households within the communities where we work with safely managed water through what we do with NUMA. Under Enhancing WASH, we're currently working in 8 districts. We've installed 68 NUMA water systems and over 3,000 household connections over the last 2 years. The typical costs that we have as part of this, there's 2 parts to it. If you look at the initial capital cost, we are bringing in both grants, as part of partnerships just like this, as well as institutional partners for the primary water infrastructure. And then we're taking out debt financing for the household connections that we are installing. So that's the way that we look at the initial capital cost. It's a split. Right now it's about 70% intake is grants, 30% is debt to install the water infrastructure that we're putting in place. And then our typical costs on the water system side, the water utility side, is we're looking at all of the revenue that's generated through the sales of water, and then we're subtracting that by all of our operating expenses, overhead expenses, capital replacement costs, and then accounting for depreciation, taxes, and debt service as well as part of our model. And currently in Northern Ghana, our pricing, at the time I put it in the presentation, was about $1.26 per meter cubed, and then $1.26 per meter cubed at our household connections and $1.17 per meter cube at our retail points of sale. That works out to just under 2 cents USD for a jerry can of 20 liters of water. So we're able to do, everything that I was just sharing about at this price point, $1.26, a financially viable, net income positive business operation that is able to service debt as part of our expansion in Northern Ghana. And then the way that we organizationally define affordability is very similar to Safe Water Network. We're looking at 3 to 5% of a household's daily or monthly income going towards safe water supply. There's a couple of guidelines out there. It's funny, we were talking about guidelines in the plenary yesterday from the WHO that define affordability in rural contexts for households, which is within 3 to 5%. So that's one of the key criteria that we look at, and we've done the math as well. So we've looked at what income level can a household afford NUMA water services, with a family of 4 to 5, and that's below $1 a day, somewhere around 75 cents a day is what we consider to be affordable based on the guidelines and criteria that exist and that are out there. There's another part of this that comes into play, which is willingness to pay, which of course that's like a dynamic measure. It's based on the value perceived by the customer for the service that we're providing. So defining affordability, people who are living on about $1 a day can afford it. Then for them, it's a dynamic decision on prioritization of resources towards purchasing Numa water or not. And as part of the work that we're doing in northern Ghana, we did a pretty wide scale survey last year, end of last year, that showed that about 90% of our Numa customers are within the bottom two with wealth quintiles in Ghana. So that's majority of our customers are living on somewhere between $1 to $3 something on a household level. So then looking at how we consider subsidies when pricing water and what role the public sector should play in part of that. At Water4 and Numa, we believe that the people closest to the problem are best suited and situated to solve the problem. So one of the key things that we look at is like they're the best equipped to do that. So in rural settings, neighbors, local religious institutions, community and tribal leadership being best positioned to identify and support and help people who are in need to ensure that they have access to safe water services. And then our ultimate goal when we're pricing water is we want to provide safe water forever to as many people as possible by creating a financially viable model and business for rural and peri-urban safe water service delivery. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who went before me. Thanks for some great introductions, and it's a hard act to follow, but I'm really excited for the questions that come out of this group afterwards. My name is Catherine Paget. I am the Director of Innovation and Special Projects at Saha Global. And I am just really excited that we were able to make space to talk about something that's so important in the WASH space in northern Ghana, which is the financial landscape of water service provision and affordability. So without further ado, I'd love to run you through a couple things today. One is what Saha does. Then I'd love to talk about our role in the NWASH program, and then I'll circle back to this question of affordability, how Saha defines it and how we measure affordability. So to start off with Saha, we are a last mile service provider in northern Ghana. So what that means is the communities that we partner with are very rural, very remote. They are less than 1,000 people. So on average, the populations that we work with are around 400 people. Additionally, these communities are ones where there are really 3 choices for water. The first is a contaminated surface water source. The second, during the rainy season, they have rainwater. And the third option is Saha treated water. What Saha does is partner with people from the community, usually women, to treat water in a centralized location and then sell it to other members of the community. And the revenue from those sales goes towards covering some of the operational costs of those treated water centers. So it covers the chemical cost of treatment, and it covers some of the cost of the labor of treating water. The gap between that revenue and the actual cost of service provision, including water testing, including some additional chemical input costs, including fuel, staffing, personnel costs, that gap is covered through subsidy. And I know that the idea of, as we've discussed in this presentation already, the idea of sustainable subsidy does seem to some in the audience like an oxymoron. And the way that we approach thinking about subsidy is that, it is our responsibility to make sure that that subsidy is maximized. And so every dollar spent on subsidy is going as far as it possibly can. And what that means for us is that we're really trying to be really effective in our operations. We're trying to reach economies of scale, and then we're also excited about the opportunity of partnership to make subsidy even more effective. Partnerships, for example, like we're talking about here in the NWASH space, and then potentially a partnership with government or other private actors. So Additionally, our communities are ones in which groundwater, for the most part, has been difficult or impossible to access. And the cost of expanding piped infrastructure to these communities is prohibitive. So in the places and communities where Saha works, there really aren't any other options. All the other solutions have failed. And that's what I really mean by last mile service provision. A little bit different than the core customer group that my peers on the panel were talking about. So the role that we play in the NWASH space is that we're, like I said before, very interested in making subsidy the most efficient it can be. And one of the things we have been exploring is the idea of cross-subsidization. So seeing if the really expensive cost of service delivery to really remote, small places, traditionally the most expensive populations to serve, and also traditionally the populations with the lowest income. Certainly our customers are at the bottom quintile of income in Ghana. So exploring the idea of subsidizing that service delivery with revenues generated from more profitable service water schemes in densely populated urban higher income areas. So in exploring that idea, we were approached by global communities last year about potentially taking on the management of one such small town system. And I would just like to say that we have some really great authority figures on the management, both the finances and operations of small town systems in the northern part of Ghana here. And certainly our depth of expertise in that area is not as deep, and we are just in early stages of that learning, but I would like to commend our partners for being very open and transparent with both their financial learnings and also their operational learnings. I think it's one really great part of working in the northern part of Ghana is this willingness and ability to collaborate and share information. And so I'll definitely defer to them about their understanding of the finances and operations, because a lot of the key learnings that we have are inherited from their experience and through the capacity building that Global Communities has made available to Saha Global. But all this is to say, we inherited a fully functional NWASH-funded small town water system from Global Communities just several months ago. It is a community in the Shegu municipality. It has 4 standpipes and 100 household connections. Everything is prepaid, so the standpipes rely on token technology to disperse water, and the household connections rely on Water4's prepaid household connections. And I'm really excited, we are really excited to learn more about the potential for cross-subsidization in this space. But I think I'll circle back where we do have the depth of learning about affordability is in serving these last mile communities. So I will circle back to that in my discussion of affordability to add a little bit of breadth to our conversation today. So Saha's mission is to provide reliable, safe, and affordable water to last mile communities so that the burden of waterborne illness is reduced and health improves. So for us, health is really our North Star here, and that metric guides a lot of our operational decisions. And the things that we know from the public health space about last mile service is, especially in communities like ours where there is a choice of contaminated, highly contaminated surface water or treated water, in that arrangement, we know that people need to be almost exclusively drinking clean water in order to see health impacts. That is not true of core customer groups that might have multiple alternatives, or that might have alternatives that have high levels of contamination. But for Saha, if it's Saha treated water or contaminated water, we know in order to see health impacts, you have to be drinking treated water the majority of the time. And lots of things go into the decision to drinking clean water. That behavior of exclusive consumption has lots of barriers and lots of motivators. Key ones that come to mind include convenience, include perceived water quality, include actual water quality, but I'm sure we can all agree that a huge one, contributing factor in deciding whether or not to buy a large amount of clean water is price. So I'm very glad that we're focusing on that today. And when we think about price and thinking about it from a health lens, we don't want to overcomplicate things. So for us, affordability is the price at which the majority of the Saha people in a Saha community are purchasing enough water so that we would anticipate seeing health impacts. And this definition can be very dynamic. And certainly we see that we have worked with communities to set and sell water at many different prices, and I'm happy to talk more about that at Q&A. But ultimately, if our mission is to have health impacts, then we know that we need to set a price that allows people to purchase enough water to be drinking only clean water. And so for the other learning that I would leave you with today is that no matter how efficient we are, that will always require subsidy. And so in talking about financing, we need to have a very dynamic approach to lots of different contexts. And in this specific context, subsidy is something that we just have to wrap our minds around, or else we will not be able to serve these last mile remote communities.
Thanks, Catherine. And so now we will move into a panel with our 3 service providers. I think that was great to hear about the different contexts and why each service provider prices water differently and why there might not be a one-size-fits-all model there. But now I'll invite my colleagues up for the panel.
So we'll start with a few sort of predefined questions, and then we'll open it up for the audience to ask some questions of our great panelists as well. But I guess I want to start by saying, thanks for providing such a great overview of your pricing models, your water tariffs, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into the water tariffs that you're using. And specifically, I'm curious how often each of your water systems review and update your water tariffs. What determines that frequency, and whether or not that frequency is enough to kind of keep up with rising operating expenses. As we know, there's inflation, costs are constantly increasing. So I'm curious to hear more about, how you update and review your water tariffs.
Since the microphone is here.
I don't know how I got down there.
Yes, so at Safe Water Network, our price increases, first of all, they are informed by changes in or increases in our operating expenses. As I did indicate in my presentation, we've had inflation as a major challenge with our field operations. Currently, we have inflation averaging around 25%. I recall last 2 years post-COVID, we were doing almost 50 to 60% annual inflation rates, and that is quite high. And it affects our operating costs when it comes to, especially power, transportation to be able to visit sites. And a lot of the equipment we use are also imported, the chlorine, the alum, and all that. And we also have a rapidly depreciating local currency, a currency that depreciates almost 30% per annum. So on the back of all that, price increases are necessary if we can keep our field operations running. We try as much as possible to take price increases at least once in a year. We have had some extreme cases where it's almost impossible we have to take another price increase, but we try on an annual basis to be able to take at least one price increase per year. And as I said, it's essentially in response to increase in operating expenses. That is what really gets us to do it. And we try to keep an open and transparent accounting process where periodically we share updates on the operating expenses, with our customers and also with the local government authorities. I must admit that we've never had a formal approval from any of these sources to take a price increase. There's almost always a pushback. And especially for customers that fetch as standpipes, we see drops in demand. But over time, we are able to find our way back to the pre-price increases levels. So with affordability in mind, we try to find our way around some of these challenges, but they are simply inevitable, and this is how we've been able to do it, at least over the past few years that we've been in operation. I don't know what my other side.
I think I would echo a lot of what Joe said about the challenges of depreciating currency. And so at Saha, we've combined like benchmark reviews of cost of living based on depreciating currency, increased fuel costs. Like it affects all elements of our organization, not just pricing, including fuel costs, staff salaries. So we just have periodic quarterly cost of living reviews where we can look at and better understand the effects of depreciating currency. Additionally, so we coupled that with a dynamic approach based on water production per person. And so I'll give you an example. In January of this year, the cost of chlorine went up. We tried, because we were really interested in covering as much operational costs as possible, we increased our tariffs from 10 pesos per 20 liters, which is about half of my peers' selling cost. We increased that to cover the cost of chlorine. And we saw within 3 months a really decreasing in demand. And because we are a nonprofit and because we're able to hold that like health impact orientation in mind, we then went back to the drawing board, realized that we weren't able to pass that along to consumers, and reduced our price again to a level that got us back to that pre-price increase production levels.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Joe. They've said it all really well. We look at things very similarly. We do a quarterly review of the tariff, looking at all of the factors that they've shared. Deflation that's currently going on in Ghana, cost of living changes, and then we import a lot of our CapEx components and CapManX components in hard currency, whether that's in Euro or USD. So we do have a peg as well to hard currencies that we look at and we try to keep in mind. So we do this review quarterly as part of our quarterly review process. But in terms of making tariff changes, I would say that's more on an annual or semi-annual basis. Due to the rapidly changing Ghana economy, we have done a semi-annual change over this past year, but typically I would say it's annual if we have to. There are some countries where currency, cost of living changes are really stable, where we don't have to make such substantial changes.
Thanks, everyone. I think those are some great points. Now that we've talked about what all goes into your pricing of water, I wanted to ask if full cost recovery is the ultimate goal in pricing water, then why or why not?
Yeah, thanks, Samantha. I'll start us out on this one. It is our ultimate goal. It's a long-term goal, though. We're currently at a blend of financing of 70% grants, 30% debt for the initial water systems that we are installing. And we've got a long-term target that's pretty far out there, 2033, 2034, where we do want to get to a point where full cost recovery can be achieved. Because when we're looking at the scale and the immensity of the problem, as well as the lack of resources to address the problem, we want to be able to demonstrate a financially viable business model that works so that we can actually begin to make a dent in the water crisis. Private finance, other sources of investment finance are going to be a key way that we can do this. So that's something that's core to what we're trying to do, is demonstrate a model that works in rural communities between 1,000 and 5,000 people is really our niche that we work in, with everything above that really being more proven in terms of financial viability. So pass it over to.
I think my previous comments made it pretty clear that financial viability is not our target. I think we focus instead on making sure our subsidy is the most efficient that it can be by, placing downward pressure on our costs of service delivery, and also with the long-term goal of making this transparent enough and replicable enough that we could bring on government partners for either replication or adoption.
Thank you. I will associate with Richard's comments. For us, ultimately, it's about being able to recover capex to the extent that it is feasible. We know it is feasible for some of the stations we have in our portfolio, but we sort of taking it one step at a time. For us, the priority is, in the short to medium term, be able to cover fully our local operating expenses and then our capital maintenance expenses, because without that, we cannot keep the pumps running, we cannot keep the services available. So for instance, if you look at the work we're currently doing in that enhance and wash, what we've learned is if we invest in a typical station and we put in place other what we call high impact optimizations like solar, so that we can reduce on the cost of power, direct pipe connections, because wherever we've done that, we've seen demand go up. Once demand is up, we can get a lot more revenue. Alongside the use of automated water dispensers, so that we don't have to put in vendors who we have to pay commission for revenue that they collect. Once we also were able to add prepaid meters, so that we provide that flexibility for our customers to be able to pay for water, we are also in a position to reduce arrears and unpaid water bills. With all these mix of solutions on board, if we're able to do that right from day one, it puts our stations on a much more sort of a good pathway towards being able to cover their OPEX and to some extent the capital maintenance expenses. And if we're able to do that on a more sustained basis and grow the portfolio, and even for the old ones that we've done, if we're able to inject some of these initiatives in there, we see a pathway to being able to cover the OPEX and then the capital maintenance expenses. But as I said, capital recovery is an objective only to the extent that it is feasible for a particular station that we will be considering. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And so you've all talked a bit about what your organizations are doing to maybe get to full cost recovery, if it's even possible. But would you mind talking a bit about how you think the sector can ensure sustainability for now without full cost recovery tariffs, and what sources of funds might help fill the gap?
I think, Joe, you had some exciting stuff to talk about here.
Well, for us, we take a position that so long as we don't have the required revenue in terms of taxes and transfers to be able to cover both the capex and then the ongoing expenses, we necessarily have to apply tariffs. We necessarily have to be able to sell the water. So certainly, pricing is key. Pricing reviews are inevitable. We envisage that the public sector has a role to play if we can be able to provide a sustainable service. So if government sees water as a social service, I don't see why we should be seen to be providing a social service and paying economic tariffs for power, for instance, because we are charged commercial rates, we are not charged domestic rates. There are bits and pieces of our work that, just as government subsidizes for public sector service providers, I think government can play a much more leading role in that. When it comes to capex, again, we have been successful with a number of local government authorities, but it's not been something that is institutionalized, something that you can be certain that for most local government authorities, they will budget and earmark some funding to be able to cover that. On a case-by-case basis, you can have one local government authority saying that for your capex, I will provide maybe 20 to 30% of it. But if it's something that is institutionalized, then it makes it a bit more easier for service providers to also mobilize other required investments to be able to expand access. So that's basically my point of that.
Sure, yeah, happy to. Yeah, thanks, Joe. Well said. It's kind of going back to a point that I just previously mentioned, looking at the amount of resources that are available through like Western aid and charity, as well as public finance through governments. About 25% of the resources that are needed over the next 10 years to provide safely managed water to everybody exist currently, based on how current allocations are being done. So as we're looking at the amount of money that's actually there and existing to solve the problem through those charity-based and public forms, it's just not enough money. So like as we look at this and as we talk about it in sessions such as this one, we really advocate for that money to be used as efficiently and as smart as possible on the charity aid and public side, and then recognizing the role that the private sector can play in filling that gap. So with those resources that are available, for last mile communities, for people who genuinely can't afford a service, to be able to target that aid and charity that is available towards those types of service delivery mechanisms, while looking more at blended finance and commercial finance in places where it does work.
Yeah. Great. So I think you've all talked a lot about your current pricing model and what works for you currently, and I'm curious to hear if your pricing model has changed at all over time, and if it has, what you've learned from the adaptations that you've made.
I can take it, the mic's here, so. Yeah, like we have had to adapt. I would say, like, just focusing on Ghana context specifically. When we started out doing Numa Water in Ghana back in 2016, we entered the market really in line with what all of the other organizations in Ghana were doing, what the public sector was doing as well in terms of tariffs and pricing for our water. And because the economic environment has changed so much, we've had to continue to adapt our pricing model and strategy. We haven't quite kept up with inflation and cost of living changes. I would say that the tariff increases that we've done in local currency have kept up with about 70% of like the loss in value from inflation and currency devaluation. So we've had to be adaptive in that sense to keep our pricing model and tariffs such that we can have a net income positive company. So we've had to be pretty adaptive in that way. I would say in Ghana, it's been, much more, it's required much more adapting than in other countries where we work where the currencies are a little bit more stable.
Thanks. Saha has been working in these last mile communities for 15 years now, so there has been a lot of adaptation and change. Initially, we would not be sitting on this panel saying that subsidy is necessary to recover operational expenses. Our original model was a community managed micro business model where the businesses were designed through a cost setting process with community to recover all of our operational expenses. And through that model, the average cost or tariff of water that communities would set would be around 50 peso in today's currency, so for 20 liters. And we just weren't seeing the production numbers. People were buying water, but it was a luxury good. It was not helping, it was not being purchased at quantities that would drive health impacts. And so we really had to go back to the drawing board and rethink about the way we thought about subsidy. Even I gave you a previous example of still trying to maintain OpEx coverage through profits from water sales through water tariffs that needed to be adjusted just this year. And so I think flexibility and response to actual customer behavior is really key to adjusting strategies as Saha has grown.
And I will associate with the point shared by Saha and also with Numa Water Forward. We have had to be very adaptive to challenges that are on ground. I think on our part, what we are doing is being able to blend our drive towards financial sustainability with community engagement and also with the technology integration that we've done as part of our programming. When we had just our stations delivering water through standpipes, one of the challenges we had and it's across most communities in Ghana, we have issues with coinage. So for instance, in Ghana, if you take a price increase from 10 pesos, you cannot go to 11, you can go to 12. You can only go all the way up to 20 because you simply can't find change for whoever wants to buy 20 liters of water for 11 pesos or 12 pesos, where are you going to get the 8? It's almost impossible. But being able to integrate water ATMs, prepaid meters into our program, we have been able to make some marginal price adjustments. And the exciting thing is that for households, especially the ones that have direct pipe connections onto their premises, we see the very little changes in the demand. And it's because the volumes they were consuming is almost at the same as what they are paying. They don't see that significant change in the cost of water to their overall household income. And that is what we as an organization will want to be able to continue doing. So for instance, as part of our programming we're doing under Enhancing Wash, we're starting off right with pipe connections onto premises and want to be able to have all of them on prepaid meters so that it becomes a bit more easier for us to make periodic adjustments in the pricing of water. But quite apart from that, I associate with all the comments that my colleagues have shared. And I think that if we want to be able to financially sustainable and provide an affordable water services, we simply have to create the space for some innovations, some community engagement in the process, and also being able to get everybody on board to be able to serve everyone everywhere. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for all of those responses. I think we have some time to open it up to questions from the audience.
There's a microphone right behind you.
Thank you very much. My name is Alicia from Cranford University. I just want to say I do appreciate the interaction and particularly talking about the challenges around scaling up these business models. I've got two questions and either of the panelists can pick this up. My first question is, our first presenter, Mr. Osei, did mention about, community ownership. I would like them to talk a bit about where does community ownership and management comes within the different business models. And secondly, as an aspect of research and development, we're providing water, but is it dealing with issues around inequality, around health? Is there an element of research and development in the work that they're doing in these communities? Thank you.
I can start. Community ownership is so interesting because it's clearly such an important part of ensuring that any service is actually going to work for the people that it is intended to work for. And also, I think for too long, it has been a sort of a catch-all for not providing professional support. And water services, like all utilities, do require professional, salaried, supported technical expertise. So I don't want to get confused between, I think that there is a happy medium where there's community involvement, but that is not being used to mask over sort of larger scale neglect. And so I think that there, in our communities are very logical places for communities to have participation in selecting the people who will be running the businesses, in communicating about water production and making decisions about seasonal transitions and location, and all sorts of the dynamic parts of running a water business in the community. And I think that Saha is very clear that there will always be the need for things like water quality testing, that is even third-party water quality testing outside of Saha to provide oversight and transparency. And so that's answer to your first question. I'll pass it along.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, Alicia, thanks for your question. On our end, we build, own, operate, and maintain all of the water systems that we install as part of the work that we do. And then we professionally maintain and manage those water systems after the installation. So our team in Northern Ghana consists of about 70 full and part-time employees who have different roles, primarily on the sales and then utility management side of things, to ensure that our water is 24/7 available, reliable, and safe to drink for all of us as well. On like the equality or inequality standpoint, what we do organizationally is through the retail points that we install. We ensure that they are equally distributed throughout the communities where we work to ensure that there is access to safe water through the water system that we're installing, ideally within like 100 to 200 meters across the town. And then we open up household connections to everybody that's interested. A key learning that we've had in northern Ghana that you don't really see as you just drive through the town is there's like some serious tribal boundaries that exist in the town that we weren't like quite aware of, different contexts in southern Ghana into northern Ghana. That was a big learning for us of ensuring that we managed and developed those relationships really well so that we were also providing equitable service between the different tribal groups with different leadership and structures within each town. We also do free water for all public schools. There's been a public mandate in Ghana. It's recently beginning to change a little bit, but that all services at public schools were free. So that was one thing that we thought we could do as a business, is to ensure that all the kids and customers' kids who are at school do have safe water while they're at school. And then we offer connections to private schools that exist, as well as all of the healthcare facilities within the towns that we work. Joe, anything to add?
Well, nothing. Just one small point that I think one unique thing is getting communities and local government authorities to the point where they appreciate the distinct roles and values that partners like the state, which is the local government authority, the community, in this case, as customers, accessing the service, paying for it, providing valuable feedback on what they think or what they feel about the service, and then also us as water service providers also being held accountable to very high standards, being able to ensure that the service remains reliable and affordable. So we have tried to establish that as part of our work, and from day one, we seek to build consensus around these themes and the distinct roles we all have to play to be able to ensure that the entire community, schools, healthcare facilities, everyone benefits from having access to safe, reliable, and affordable water. So that's the only piece that I want to add. I think within the context of the project, because it's a behavior-led approach, we have tried as much as possible to understand the roles or how the various actors sort of behave in the process of performing these expected roles. And I believe the project continuously documents some of the lessons and evidence from these actors, and hopefully it will help shape the way water services are delivered in Ghana going forward. Thank you.
Hi, Greg Auger from World Vision. I really appreciate the panel's transparency on pricing. It sounds like working in northern Ghana, you've learned a lot. I want to ask a question about, I know we're just focused on northern Ghana, but your perspectives on, and maybe it's not relevant to other areas, but in the sector, a lot of movement now is towards a model of investors getting return on investment because there's able to be full cost recovery plus the water equity model, for example. So based on what you've learned in northern Ghana, would that kind of a model be viable, or what would your advice be for the sector? And I have a second question, which is very different. We know that probably most of the people in your areas are subsistence farmers, so their income is seasonal. Have you experimented with any kind of seasonal payments? Because people can obviously afford more in the harvest season than they can in the hunger season.
Thank you. I'll take the seasonal question first. I think in our operations in northern Ghana, we have an extensive engagement with our customers from day one. We have tried pay as you use service, and we've seen that working. Although we know incomes sort of vary seasonally, I think to a large extent the majority are able to set aside funding to be able to purchase water as and when they need them. And I think also providing them an opportunity to make flexible payments through prepaid. So as low as 1 CD, 50 pesos, you can purchase water and use it. So to that extent, it makes it easier for them to be able to afford the service. In terms of being able to invest in equity, to be able to earn a return on it, for us as an organization, we want to take it, and that's for Safe Water Network. We see some opportunity in there if we are able to invest right, have a more cost-effective service, create as much demand, volumes, and get the revenue, it is possible to earn a return on that capital. But we haven't gotten to the stage yet. I think in our case, especially with our experience in Northern Ghana, we want to be able to deal with the OPEX and the capital maintenance. Anything in excess of that, we can begin to look at some of these financing options. I don't know, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I'll touch real quick on like the equity aspect. Under, like in Northern Ghana, with the pricing structures that we currently have in place, the current volumetric usage of each individual household, average purchase volumes across the towns that we have, I would say we're really close to being able to look at a debt and equity, like more of a traditional debt and equity approach to like launching and scaling up a whole new business operation in that way. At the same time, Water 4, with our NUMA businesses, we've like launched a rocket into space. We've gotten it to the moon, and we now want to take it to Mars before really looking at opening up equity, allowing other investors to come in, because we're really wanting to prove our concept at scale. But I've done the math, like just looking at the numbers, it's really close. But the variables are really reactive to change. So if you're not able to maintain a USD currency of like $1.25 to $1.50, if households are not purchasing, 3.5 to 4.5 cubics a month, then you really quickly go from a financially viable model to one where you're not servicing the debt and you're not, having the return on equity that the investor wants.
I'd love to jump back to your question on seasonality. I think the industry standard is pay as you fetch or pay as you use. And that is just inherently at odds with the income of the people that we are serving. I'm really interested in creative ways to make this work for subsistence farmers. One piece that we use is to recover some operational expenses from the water vendors themselves in lump payments in the form of an insurance scheme for their capital maintenance expenses. So there will be a lump sum every year to cover the cost of any capital maintenance expenses that will be incurred in the next year. But it is so hard to, take away this like sort of gold standard of revenue collection, which is pay as you fetch, and combine that with a challenge that I'm really excited to talk to anyone about who has insight into that. I think there are lots of different models that from agriculture and other financing pieces that the WASH space could learn from.
My name is Jeremiah Ateng, with IRC Ghana. I wanted to check with the panel whether you have some reflections around the political question around tariff setting. I don't know if you have some experience from Northern Ghana, because we know the current guidelines by the Community Water and Sanitation Agency for the rural sector is that the proposed tariffs have to be approved by the local government authorities. We are also aware that usually tariffs can be very political in terms of maybe raising them to a certain level. There can be backlash from the water users or the communities in terms of how much they are able to raise, because local government will also be concerned that people are being overcharged for the service. Because we know in the urban space, it does happen usually. For example, Ghana Water Company Limited proposes certain tariffs to do full cost recovery, but the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission will usually not offer them what they are looking for, because they are also looking at the issues of affordability. Currently, if you look at the tariff regime, particularly like in the Hafo region where IRC works, it's quite varied. You see the community-owned money schemes charging much lower tariffs as against the private sector, the same water enterprises on the upper band. So I don't know if there's some you can reflect on that a bit from the experience in from Northern Ghana.
Let me jump on this one first, because I'm sure my colleagues will have lots to say about it in depth. I think we also had a very lively discussion about this just yesterday when we were talking about this panel. I think just to set the tone for where I think we can go with this is This is a new space as the rural water regulating space changes and is very dynamic in northern Ghana right now. I think none of us expect to give a number or an answer. Instead, I think that we would really like to be part of a context-specific process that involves lots of different stakeholders, because as you've heard today, we are serving lots of different core customer groups, and there are lots of different, there is no one silver bullet to the issue of, affordability in the water space. And so I would just leave us with the desire to be part of a dynamic conversation, rather than like, oh, here's the answer that Saha or anyone should get behind, and here's why.
Yeah, thanks for your question, Jeremiah. We had a great discussion yesterday. Just kind of a quick side note on that is one of the key things that we talked about and we recognized is that as you go from more urban areas to the most remote last mile communities, at every step along that way, it costs more to deliver the service. So, that's one of the things that I would hope, like IRC, you guys can help with, as part of these discussions with, national government and regulatory body, is just that reality that does exist because of the replication and duplication of efforts to do the service delivery. It's more pumps, it's more wells, it's more filtration, it's more towers. The costs increase the further you move into the rural sectors. To your questions directly on, proposed tariffs and tariff changes, we work really closely with the municipal and district governments in each of the districts where we do service delivery. And part of our service delivery contracts that we have in place with the district is that any tariff change is agreed to with the district leadership, with community leadership, and we do a round of community engagement and feedback on a price change. So we can't just wake up tomorrow, Ahmed and I say we're changing the price. We have to go through a process. Typically takes 4 to 6 weeks, to go through those discussions, get an agreement in place, do a revised annex to our service delivery contract, and then begin to implement those changes. And what we've seen is that by really delivering an excellent service, water that is 24/7 available, it's reliable, turn the tap on, the water flows out, and it's safe to drink and conveniently delivered, people are willing to pay that premium, or at least to keep up with the differences in the changes in tariff due to cost of living and devaluation of the local currency as part of that.
Same points. Same points. Maybe what I'll say is, in fact, we've in my over a decade experience when it comes to pricing reviews, we've always used a similar approach where you want to inform local government authorities of your intention. You want to be able to share periodic reports on the operations, the financial performance of the portfolio. There's never been a single approval of a request for a price increase. I recall there was one instance 2-3 months after a pricing review, I had an encounter with the chief executive, and he was complaining about people are saying that the water is expensive and all that. Fortunately, I had the volumes over the past 2 to 3 months with me, and I showed that to him. Where is the evidence that it is expensive? People are still paying for it. The volumes remain the same. So, and it's not like, we don't take delight in increasing prices. The reality is that the inputs we need to be able to deliver the services are expensive. But I associate with you your points. It's a very political decision. And as much as possible, we have made the case. Of course, we understand that when it comes to decentralized water services, we don't enjoy the kind of economies of scale that urban water has. To have almost the same treatment facility and delivering to thousands, to millions. We don't have that. But we've always asked that government should be quite transparent with the cost of delivering water services by itself and also other state-supported agencies. Once we have that open conversation around what it costs to deliver, we can almost come to the same page on whether the tariffs that we are charging are realistic or otherwise. And if not, then who then covers that gap that exists? So we take that position, and again, RIC is a big player. If you can work with us, if you want to drum home this message, we're happy to support that, and also to provide the evidence so we can engage with government. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Hi, David Spira from Deloitte. Really impressed by the presentations and the discussions, and of course the work being done by the project. If I could, two just very quick questions. Can you share a little bit about how the service providers sort of obtain the right to provide service, or whether it's a concession or a contract in a given community, and how that process takes place, and the extent to which that's a not a barrier to scale, but one of the limiting factors in sort of scaling up these services. And then secondly, if you did have, if the burden of full cost recovery was removed, and at least regarding CapEx, in whole or in part, is that, to what extent could these solutions really scale and provide the type of coverage that's necessary if you didn't have to have the full cost recovery on CapEx, and some or all was provided from public sector, across subsidy, across, through different means? Thank you.
I'll just have Jeff add his question to make it the past.
Oh, no, it's okay.
It's all right, it's all good.
I'll let them answer, and then I think we can squeeze in one more.
If there is some.
Okay. 7 minutes and some closing remarks too.
Okay,
So.
let's keep it quick. We have lots of questions. Government contracts, community partnership was the first question. Saha, I think I speak for all of us when we all work with the MDAs, the municipal, what am I missing? Metropolitan Municipal District Assemblies, who are responsible, it is their mandate, like water is their mandate. So we all work closely with those counterparts in the different districts that we work in to have contractual agreements with them. As far as we work in about 460 communities, and that community partnership process is one where we, meet chief VIP, community leadership, pitch the idea, get a consensus, do an approval to do a community meeting, have a community meeting, get approval for that. That's sort of what it looks like on our end, and I don't think the CapEx question is particularly relevant.
Yeah, I can touch on my perspective of that really quick. Yeah, I guess two parts of it for me in response to that is, I think for one part of the question is like, how fast could we scale? And then there's another part of like, if we didn't have to do like debt service or capital replacement, is that kind of accurate? Sorry, you don't have a mic anymore, but.
That's okay, I can
Okay.
project.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the first question, I'm interested to know how you obtain the concessions in the first place. Is everyone marketing to different communities? And, if Saha has a community meeting, does that mean that someone else doesn't have a community meeting and pitch an alternate solution? How does that?
Yeah, we do work well to coordinate across districts to not step on each other's feet or duplicate efforts really well. And then, as Catherine was sharing on, getting the concessions and getting the agreements, that's with the MMDAs. So that's with the districts, that's getting either a concessionary agreement, a service delivery contract, or an MOU in place to do a delegated service delivery for the district. That is an actual avenue in Ghana that you can do. There's a Local Authorities Act that does allow the MMDAs to delegate service delivery for utility services to local partners, private partners that they choose to partner with.
And I mean, it's not all perfect coordination, right? Like, we provide a very basic service, like a basic service on the service ladder. There is no one else in the community. It's not, we would love more competition. There is not competition. And I think that we don't have too much overlap.
Yeah, essentially that's it. I mean, you talk to communities, you talk to the DA, have a formal agreement. That's what the LI says. You apply to the assembly and they will almost always approve that for you. I think for us, one step in addition is 2 key documents. One, because we are abstracting water, you need an abstraction permit. And then because you are also laying pipes in public spaces, you want to submit the designs to the local government authority for them to approve so that you don't end up putting pipelines in places where there are likely to be roads further down the line. That's it. I hope we have answered all your questions.
Plenty. Thank you.
Just to add, the discussion. So what is happening is that we are not really concerned.
For the online people.
Thank you. We are not really concerned with the partners that we are working with. We are more concerned with the government institutions. Yes. So we have started a discussion with the ministry to zone the country. So that if we know Safe Water Network is working in these MMDAs, tomorrow Ghana Water will not go there with the backing of the government. That now you have the markets who are also coming in. So we are working on that with the ministry. Thank you.
I think Jeff,
Jeff, you're up, man.
Is there a couple of questions?
I
defer to is there time or are we gonna cut it? It's okay.
No, we could probably squeeze it in.
I think we have 2 questions.
Yeah, two last questions.
In theory, the session's supposed to end in 2 minutes, but people want to stay later.
Jeff is deferred.
Jeff has different
So
questions.
that's so fascinating. It's so fascinating about the district thing, and I'm just thinking, if you're not working in competition, then do you actually work in same districts? But that's not the question I had. My question was actually about who's backing you on all of this. And donors are notoriously fickle, and we've had a lot of experience of that in the water sector recently. So what do you do to protect your systems against a donor losing faith in what you're doing, or reprioritizing that they don't actually want them to be more interested in mosquitoes? Thanks.
I'm not on our development team, so they're watching. I would say that, this is the vulnerability of subsidy from where I'm sitting. And that's why we've all approached the need for that or not in different ways. I think the best case that we can make is that this is the best use of dollars spent. And so really driving home those cost metrics as compared to other players. But this, like we said, there's not enough funding in the space to serve the need that exists. So we will always be vulnerable to that.
We recognize the fickleness, of donors and institutional partners who can change like giving habits or, giving preferences as the outcomes of their organization change or the ones that they're desiring to have. So that's a key part for us, is to achieve financial viability so that if, some of our major supporters do decide to no longer fund water services, the utility arm of our business is fine. It does have an effect and impact on the construction side of the work that we do, because that's a huge workforce, but that the business and that the core services that we were, started and built to provide do continue to provide those services over time. I'm probably out of a job, but that's key to it. That's key to it for us. So.
It's the least problem.
Yeah. And then I think for all of us, major partners are the, major partners here. Is Hilton, Stone, Erie. So another idea on this. Yeah. See.
Well, thank you all. It's been a great panel. And thank you for providing all your different contexts, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on these issues. I will just give the microphone to Jason for a minute, just to close us out. And then you'll all be free to go.
Speech. Just very quickly, wanted to say, rarely have I heard such a well-informed and eloquent panel on a very complex topic. My name is Jason Brooks from Global Communities. I'm our Global Water Director. And I want to, Enhancing WASH is a consortium of 11 members. And what you've seen here is a representation of how we work together in terms of sharing and collaboration. And I just wanted to highlight one thing. One word, if there's one to highlight out of this, is context. The reason there are different answers, there are different solutions, there are different approaches needed is because context matters. Depending on the size, the location, the constituency, the wealth of the communities we serve. To reach SDG 6, we need more solutions, more ideas, but ultimately, it's collaboration that allows us to learn from each other so that we can shorten the amount of time to reach the SDG 6 goal. Thank you all very much for being here today.